Everything's fine on 93.9 Dublin South FM.
Good to be here again while we are celebrating our hard-won independence, the 78th Independence Day. We must reflect on the lessons of history. The mistakes we made some 250 years ago have led to the loss of our freedom and our sovereignty. And today we must ensure we don't repeat these mistakes. Thank you, friends, for joining us again this week. Last time we discussed India's remarkable transformation over past 78 years. Today we will research seriously into how India, in the first place, became a colony of Britain, Dutch, the French, and the Portuguese. We must understand the past to safeguard our future, and therefore we will be drawing parallels between the policies that paved the way for colonial rule then and the risk of some of our current economic strategies. We live in a free country and we should have the power to say things which people don't want to hear. So, with that spirit of George Orwell, 1984, let's turn our attention to India of 1600s. The East India Company's journey to domination can be broadly divided into three phases, as I see. The first phase, from the early 1600s until 1757, the Battle of Plassey, which changed the course of East India Company. It saw the company's gradual amassing economic power, which it used to build a formidable military. The second phase, I would say, is marked by exploitation, where East India Company systematically dismantled Indian industries and impoverished our craftsmen. The third phase began after 1857 mutiny, leading to the British Raj, where exploitation intensified even though the voices of Indian independence grew louder. Today, we will focus on a period of 1600s to 1757, particularly the economic policies and the trade practices that allowed East India Company to gain such influence. What was the philosophy, the principles behind those economic policies? One crucial mistake at the time was granting trading privileges to East India Company by the Mughal Emperor then, Jahangir. These privileges, including duty-free trade in certain regions, enabled the company to accumulate enormous wealth and resources, which they later used to exert political and military influence. Over time, then many rulers became economically dependent on European trade goods and military supplies, making them vulnerable to British pressure. Europe, from its being, have always been in a war with a high sense of insecurity. Therefore, their arms, their military strategies, and the goods have always been marked with innovation. Therefore, when those military supplies came to India, our rulers and kings were very happy with the performance. This East India Company exploited this dependency. It helped them gain territorial control, demanding land in return and political authority for this continued economic benefits. Now, fast forward to today. We see parallels in how India has opened its door to foreign trade. First, by signing many agreements like the WTO, the TRIP, and the most favored nation treaties with different countries. While these agreements initially bring a feel-good factor with those shiny new goods or a spike in the trade, they often erode indigenous talent, craftsmanship, and innovation. Just as India once lost its industries to foreign dominance, today our traditional agricultural practices, in fact traditional crops, specialized metalworks, alloys, and textiles are at risk of being overshadowed by foreign goods and technologies. Silk, cotton, these fibers are now competing with the world market. Consider the case of genetically modified crops that are being approved after this budget of 2024. So these modern seeds introduced are under the guise of innovation and they clearly threaten to displace traditional crops. In fact, they are banned in Europe. And this is just as the East India Company once displaced Indian industries. I would like to cite the Gujarat potato farmers' legal battle against PepsiCo over the patented seeds. And it is a stark reminder of how foreign corporations, companies can dictate terms, can enforce their terms, their policies. It took a lengthy legal battle and a semi-revolution in order to stop PepsiCo from demanding the farmers from their right to grow crops. Imagine now the impact of 109 foreign crops, genetically modified crops, that are allowed to come into India in the name of innovation, and how it will rule our agriculture for decades to come. Like the exploitation of raw materials in the colonial era, today the exploitation of Indian labor, when I say labor, it is the well-educated, highly qualified Indian youth, engineers, scientists, IT professionals. They mirror the exploitation of those days. They are forced to work for global giants, and the benefit that they get do not percolate down into the real infrastructure of India, or rather it is minimal. We are only seeing pockets of development in large cities like Mumbai, Delhi, Bangalore, Gurgaon, etc. While these wages offered by foreign corporations may be enticing, lucrative in comparison, but then they are just about one-tenth the value these corporations would have paid for the same work back home in their country. So like the rulers of old India, our government is often prioritizing short-term gains or the spike in their statistical numbers vis-a-vis the long-term sovereignty by allowing foreign corporations to benefit from our educated labor. And there is no meaningful transfer that is visible. So for example, Lockheed Martin, the manufacturer of F-16 fighter jets, not long ago, these aircraft threatened India's sovereignty through our western neighbor Pakistan. Today, the same company wants to manufacture parts of these jets in India without offering full technology offer. They also want to sell these fighter jets, upgraded fighter jets, F-21, to India, but not at a price in which they are manufactured in India. So we have a flaw in our policy towards these companies, and somebody else is dictating those tariff policy. This simply echoes the past when our rulers welcomed foreign trade. The influx of Chinese goods, they are appealing, they are fancy, but then they have been undercutting Indian innovation and economic sovereignty. Our telecom still runs few devices which are detrimental to the security of India, and those devices have been banned in Europe and in America for simple reason that the country's data might have a backdoor export to China's intelligence agencies. On the other hand, when foreign governments adopt protectionist policy, they face little opposition. So for example, America in last 8 years have given protection to their goods from the Mexican exports. They have given protection on the tariffs for the goods coming from China. Europe has slapped 50% tariff on Chinese electric vehicles in order to protect the Tesla vehicles. Yet in India, we struggle to protect even the prices of life-saving medicines. Therefore, the economic sovereignty is fragile, and it would not be hard to say that India's economy resembles that of 1600s in a troubling way. Only if our tariff sovereignty, our economic sovereignty were secure, our farmers would be exporting their tea, coffee, spices at a premium prices to the West. Our vehicles would be dominating the roads across the world. It would have been as expensive and as much as in demand like the Saudi oil. Talking of medicines, our traditional medicines should have been staples in the hospital across the developed nations. Rather, they are a taboo or considered as alternatives at best. One mistake by the divided India of 1600s costs us our freedom. It is a step-by-step approach to losing sovereignty. Therefore, we must ensure that the united India of 21st century does not repeat that mistake by compromising in any way our economic sovereignty in the name of foreign trade and foreign investment. Before I conclude, let me share a few more examples. In 1997, the Titan watches wanted to participate in the Basel Watch and Jewelry Fair in Switzerland, but they were denied entry. And the reason being that Indian watches were competitive because the labor in India is cheap, the production cost is low, and the quality of Indian watches were at par with the international standards. Similarly, we narrowly avoided losing our basmati rice to US company's patent. We have been facing challenges with the patents, with the biopiracy for turmeric and the healing properties of turmeric. As we speak, India is negotiating a trade deal with Britain where we are in a risk of flooding our markets with cheap apples, and that could devastate the farmers of Himachal Pradesh and Kashmir. Our northern neighbors, economic might of China, they have not let their economic sovereignty leave their shores. According to the latest report, China is building 240 super fighter jets every year that can take on the best fighter jets in the world. So tell me, dear friends, who can dare the Chinese? I'm not against collaboration or joint ventures. They are welcome. But then any attempt to override the interests of Indian craftsmen, Indian engineers, scientists, Indian farmers, or erode our traditional knowledge base, they must be prevented. Being protectionist about one's economy and population is not a dirty word, I would say, despite what modern economists might suggest. India is a land of rich natural and human resources, and leaving our doors wide open could take us back to the era of colonial past. Thank you for joining me today, dear friends. Next week, we will continue to explore the lessons from the India's colonial past, ensuring that we safeguard our nation's hard-earned freedom for generations. Bye for now.
You are listening to 93.9 Dublin South FM.
Broadcasting from the Dundrum Town Centre. This is Dublin South FM.